Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bible 365 with me, your host, Kathy Carter. I am reading through the Bible in 365 days, 1 year, and I am reading through it chronologically using the 1 Year Chronological Bible reading plan that's available on oneyearbibleonline.com, which I have down here at the bottom so you can see it. And so you can just download that free Bible reading plan and you can read up with me. Today we are on day 131 and we are reading the book of Psalms, which is obviously 150, I think, Psalms, but we are on Psalm 35 through 38. And on your calendar, this is May 10th. So if you're following along with me, you've started on January 5th. Sorry, January 1st. This is May 10th. I don't know even where I got the 5th from. If this is your first day and you've never been with me before, welcome. I'm excited that you're here. And I am hoping that you're here because you are interested in who God is, or just interested in reading the Bible and seeing what it's all about. So today we are reading more of the Psalms of King David. We have been on these Psalms for the past few days, and we're going to be on it for at least another week. Psalms is another word for music or poem. It is written in such a way to be done musically. And so if you guys remember, again, always saying, if you've been with me before, you'll remember that David set up an entire all the Levites, not all, but there's an entire sect of the Levites that is playing music in the temple where God is. And so they would be singing these songs and these psalms. And a lot of them are in memory to remind the people of who God is, or what our sin is, or who we are as a people group, things like that. So these are all reminders or instruction or repentance, or when he's crying out to the Lord, right? All different things. And they are always for God. They are always for the Lord. And they are, this section that we are in is very specifically from King David. We have a lot of other Psalms that we'll be getting into, but these are the ones that are very specifically from King David. King David is king over all 12 tribes of Israel. And so this is in the neighborhood of maybe like 1100 BC. So this is a long time before Jesus is born. All right. So hopefully you got a little bit of that down. And then I'm just going to move into the Psalms, because these Psalms I can really dig into verse by verse, but obviously, as I've said probably over the past few days, we're unable to do that. We don't really have the time to do that. So I just really like to pick out certain things that I see that I find are really interesting. So remembering that David went through a lot of things in his life, and I find our last Psalm most interesting because it's something that he was going through that I didn't know he was going through. But all right, so in our first one, we start with Psalm 35. And in Psalm 35, he's calling out to God for help with his enemies. We see this a lot. This is not the first Psalm he's done this in. This is semi-regular for David to do. And so what I feel like I'm tending to find is that David lays everything out in front of him. We see him personality-wise. We see him in all extremes of emotions. We see him crying. We see him dancing. We see him laughing. We see him being sneaky and doing things against the Lord. And so we see all different kinds of ranges of emotion of David. He doesn't seem to really be afraid to lay it all on the table. And so one of the things he obviously does is he writes it all out to the Lord. So whether he's singing it or writing it, poetry style, he's doing all of this to the Lord. And so he's putting it on paper for everyone to see. So crying out against his enemies. So verse 1, I always like to read verse 1. Contend, Lord, with those who contend with me. So he wants the Lord to kind of take on the people who are contending with him, which really is actually, we're all supposed to be doing this. So if we believe in the Lord and we believe that the Lord fights our battles. As a matter of fact, even saying that, I'm going to try and see if I can put that on in the comments. There's this great song about fighting our battles and the Lord fighting our battles, and he's surrounding us. We think that people are all around us, but really the Lord is surrounding us if we are believers and followers of him. He surrounds us and fights our battles for us. And so David always leaves his battles at the Lord's feet. And when he doesn't, usually is when he falls into traps. But when he's leaving them at God's feet, God is really good and just, and God does lift him up on many, many occasions. Of course, we see that he does. There are seasons in which he's running or he's, not in the best of positions, but the Lord is always there for him. And so he's always reaching out to the Lord. And he says, take up shield and armor, arise and come to my aid, brandish spear and javelin against those who pursue me. And it's just even funny, the use of weapons to him. God doesn't necessarily use weapons, but he does use people. And so there would be, if it's a battle, right, he would be using the people in the battle to protect David. And then he says, say to me, I am your salvation. So he's saying to God, God, say to me that you are my salvation. Salvation is the one that saves, right? So this is a word to remember. I'm sure we've heard it before, but hearing it in the Psalms is really just bringing this home. Like, God is the one that saves, right? So God is our salvation. So for any of us who believe that we are saved, God is our salvation. And so David is asking him, like, literally at this time, while my enemies are fighting for me, be the one that saves me. Save me from a very literal situation that's happening here on earth. May those who seek my life be put to shame. May they be like chaff before the wind, right? So he's now asking for his enemies to kind of be the ones that are taken out, and for him to be the one that's saved. And a lot of it, he says, since they are they've hidden these things without cause, right? So there's no cause for them to come after David. They shouldn't be doing this, and so God is asking him to take him out. Once again, we hear on verse 9, then my soul will rejoice in the Lord and delight in his salvation, in his saving of me, right? In the way in which he saved me. Then again, he kind of goes on with what people against him do. And in verse 16, it says, like the ungodly, they maliciously mocked, they gnashed their teeth at me. Like the ungodly leads me to believe that these people who are chasing after him in this moment are maybe other Israelites. So again, I'm going to say this may be the time where he's running from Saul, or it may be the time where he's running from Absalom. So there are a couple of moments in David's life where he's actually running from Israelite people, and in some ways, he's trying not to fight with them, but they're always coming after him. And then just a little bit of moving on from this. I want to just go on to this expression, because this expression we're going to see a lot. So in verse 19, it says, do not let those who gloat over me, who are my enemies without cause, do not let those who hate me without reason maliciously wink the eye, which is an expression kind of like that they're after him, right? If they maliciously wink the eye, it means that these people are coming after him. And I know that we see it in Proverbs in a lot of cases. And so just kind of an understanding, we don't use this expression anymore. I was actually unsure of what it meant. So it was one of those things that I had to look up, because who maliciously winks their eye? So it's an expression that was used at the time for somebody coming after them, right? Somebody talking about them, telling other people about them, following after them, winking their eye at them. So it's an expression that's used. And then, so I just finishing this one up. Again, he's still reaching out and begging for help. And then in verse 28, it finishes up with, my tongue will proclaim your righteousness, your praises all day long. So he's asking him for help. And no matter what happens, David is always singing the praises of the Lord. All right, moving on to Psalm 36. This one is another one that just says of David, right? So the title is sort of just of David. But in verse 1, he's giving a little bit more detail about who the listener is and what the purpose is of this message. So in verse 1, he says, I have a message from God in my heart concerning the sinfulness of the wicked. So like he's feeling either God has directly spoken to him, or, which I don't think that's what it is, because he says in my heart, or he's feeling in some ways maybe the Spirit is speaking to him in some ways, like maybe not very audibly, but he's coming to this understanding concerning the sinfulness of the wicked, right? So there's something to be said that they can see the wicked all around them. And so this is concerning that sinfulness of the wicked. There is no fear of God in the wicked. So the wicked are not afraid of the Lord. Whether it's because they don't believe the Lord exists, right? So there's this possibility that the wicked don't think that there is a God, or there's a possibility that they worship other gods instead. And so they don't fear the Lord. They might fear, I think in our Bible, the expression is Moloch or Baal, right? So they had all different names for them. But they don't fear the Lord. And so this is wicked. They've turned away from the Lord. They don't fear the Lord. And then we go into verse 2. It says, in their own eyes, they flatter themselves too much to detect or hate their sin. So they don't know the Lord, right? So they don't have a fear of the Lord, again, whether they don't know it or they worship somebody else. So they don't have an understanding of what the Lord deems good, and so they don't understand what is sin. So there's an understanding that the wicked don't even know that they're sinning. Now we can go crazy, right? We can calling out some of the really bad people that are in jail right now, whether they did or didn't know what they were doing was wrong, right? Like let's put shelf that and put that all aside for what the normal average person sees as right or wrong, right? So some of those big huge things we can recognize. If you take out somebody, let's just say, I don't want to say anything to get myself taken off of YouTube. So, but if you take someone out, or if you do something really malicious to people that are not your age, right? Like things like that, right? We can understand those things more than the world knows that those things, especially in the area in which we live, those things are wicked, right? That's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about those everyday things, right? The things that the Lord has put in place and has said, these things I deem good, these things I deem not good, right? And for them, it's a little bit different for us because they had this an area in which they were set apart, right? And so for them, there were certain things that were deemed good that the Lord wanted them to do. And the others who were outside of that, they didn't even understand some of those things were right or wrong, right? Like even the way in which now, so bringing it to our time and our space, we always use this expression, just love, right? Love your neighbor, love your, and that's amazing. And in some ways, I want to call it the other side. But what we would deem at this point, probably the wicked, has said to those of us who follow Christ, well, it's all about love. But the understanding of love is not God's understanding of love. Sometimes love looks like punishment. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice. Sometimes love looks like suffering, right? So what we have an understanding of what is good according to God, not everybody does. And so that's what he's saying here. So he's saying, like, a lot of times they don't even understand, they don't even know their sin. They can't detect their sin because they don't know what is good. So they don't know what is sinful. They don't know what is good, right? Because they have no fear of the Lord, right? So they don't even follow the Lord to understand they don't have fear of the Lord. I know that I was trying to drive that home a little bit, but I think that is in a lot of ways what separates a believer from an unbeliever, right? And we wouldn't necessarily in our world and in our time deem an unbeliever as wicked, but a lot of the wickedness, right, the things that are against God are coming from people who don't have a fear of God or an understanding of what God deems as good. And then they question those of us who do believe in God and say, how is this good or how is that good, right? So there's an understanding, which here I go again, over and over and over again, this is why I'm doing this. There's an understanding of when we read the Bible, we start to learn by God what is good. The fear of the Lord is good. It's good to be fearful of somebody that created the universe and that can strike you down in an instant, right? Like that's really good. And so recognition for those of us that do believe, there's a recognition that those that don't believe don't even understand that what they're doing is wicked, right? And so then what's the call to us in that way? So I'm just going to kind of put this out in this psalm, because David doesn't really call them to necessarily anything. He's actually just speaking to God. He's letting the people know that they don't do this. Here's the big however. Verse 5, I'm going to say is a however. It doesn't start with a however, but I want it to start. I want to add to scripture. I wanted to start with a however because I wanted to say, however, your love, Lord. So they don't know. They got no idea what they're doing. However, your love, Lord, reaches to the heavens. So like there's an understanding that like God's love is so massive and it is so big. Your faithfulness to the skies, your righteousness is like the highest mountains. Your justice is like the great deep, right? The oceans that we can't even fathom, right? They're so deep we can have. Mariana Trench, right? We don't even know even the closest of anything that goes down there. We're still finding new animals all the time. How priceless is your unfailing love. People take refuge in the shadow of your wings, and they feast on the abundance of your house. You give them drink from your river of delights, for with you is the fountain of life. In your light, we see light. And the reason why I wanted to put that however in is because it's so big that there's no excuse not to know. It sounds probably pretty harsh. And I was one that did not believe. I was one as a full grown adult that I had no concept of any of this, and I didn't believe in any of it. So I don't want to take away the fact that that's possible. But this is what we're here for, right? We're here to go, look how big the Lord is. Look at how all these pieces connect in the world. How can it make sense without a creator? Right? So drawing people into the fear of the Lord, because if you look around, it's completely obvious. I'm saying that probably sounding really prideful. That's what God has done. He's done that for us. He's made it obvious for us so we can consistently turn to him. He's given us that as a gift. He's saying, look, look at how this whole world works in unity with each other. Look at how every morning the sun comes up and every night the sun goes down. Do you think that's an accident? Right? So he makes it so it is an understanding to us. And then downside, we have no excuse. So I want to be compassionate, and I think that it's really, really important to be compassionate. But there is no excuse for those who don't look up and say it's obvious. God has made it really obvious for us. And so I just kind of plead with you in some ways just to look around you, just to be awed by the sunrise and the sunset, by the ocean, by the mountains, right? All these things that God created. Nothing man-made, right? Like man-made is amazing, but God-made is so much more magnificent. And then, starting to recognize his love and his greatness and his righteousness, right? All that comes with it. So then he says in verse 10, continue your love to those who know you, your righteousness to the upright in heart. So he's just really kind of pushing and urging that, like, for those of us who follow you and know you, kind of continue to fill us up. Don't let us forget. Hold us up in righteousness, right? Like, give us all of that so we can stay with you. And then verse 12 is sort of not great. See how the evildoers lie fallen, thrown down, not able to rise. And this is because they continue to fight against the chosen of God, and God is righteous and God is just. And whether we believe it or not, there's consequences to these things. Moving on to 37, because I feel like this is where we see some of these consequences. So these are some of those places that, let's start with this. This is of David, and this is in his later years. So verse 25, it says that he's old. It says, I was young and now I'm old. I'm going to go to verse 25 real quick. I'll read it for you. Verse 25. Yeah, exactly. I was young and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken, right? So he's lived a lot of years. So he starts with, do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For they, like the grass, will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. And what I wanted to note in this, and this is one of the things that I just brought up in the last psalm, what I wanted to note is that there are distinctions between the righteous and the unrighteous. And the distinctions, for me, I have in some ways a question. Because it says the unrighteous, if we go here, right here, it says those who are evil. Verse 2, it says, for like grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. Does that mean now? And if I look around, I see evil it's everywhere. It's inundating us all over, all the time. There's violence, there's anger, there's war, there's slavery, there's just such evil in the world, and I don't see them withering and dying away. Now, David may have been very literal. I don't know. It feels like he's not. It feels like he's being really metaphorical to me. Um, Although he was winning wars and battles, and he had, and so there's some truth to him saying that the evil that were against God, that were against David, they were dying away, right? In wars, they were dying. This feels like it's more of a longer term thing, something that happens in the future. So he says, trust in the Lord. So there's a recognition, right, that those that don't trust in the Lord, they're going to wither and they're going to die away. Don't we all die? Well, he says in verse 3, trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Verse 4, take delight in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. So evil's going to wither and die away. Those who follow the Lord are going to receive the desires of their heart from the Lord. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him and do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. So those who follow will be vindicated. So now we have a couple things. He will give us the desire, let's just say the righteous. He will give the righteous the desires of their heart and he will vindicate the righteous, right? So like no evil will come on them, or if evil does come on them, God will take care of those things, right? In vindication, God will take care of those things. Be still and wait. So just taking your time. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Don't forget. Here we go again. So in verse 9, it says, for those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. And then he says it again. It says, going right down to verse 10, a little while and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. So again, it sounds like although David's old, so some of this may or may not have happened, but maybe he's talking about when Solomon reigns, there's going to be some peace and they're going to have the land, but they'd already inherited the land. So they're already in the land of Israel and they have inherited the land. But maybe it's talking about peace. And I keep saying maybe because I want to be clear that I don't actually necessarily believe this is at the time. I believe this is future tense. So it says again, those who will inherit the land. So we say this a few times. And then he talks about the wicked again. Everything's going to happen to the wicked. But then we go to verse 18 and 19. And in verse 18 and 19, it says, the blameless spend their days under the Lord's care, and their inheritance will endure forever. In times of disaster, they will not wither. In days of famine, they will enjoy plenty. Are we being literal? Right? In famine, we're all starving. Are we being literal or are we being metaphorical? Verse 20, the wicked will perish. Are we going to look at this? And in some ways, these are serious questions, but in some ways, they're sort of rhetorical. Are we going to look at this and say, anyone that's suffering from famine and dies of starvation is the wicked? I think we cannot say that. All through time, right? Like people who followed Christ or followed God, the Lord, and then followed Christ died of all different kinds of things. Did that mean that they weren't right? Like, are they supposed to live forever because you follow the Lord? Or does he mean there is an eternity, right? There's something after this thing. There's a thing that we're on, and then there's a something after that. And that is where the righteous are going to inherit the land. And that is where there's going to be no wicked anymore, that the evil will not be there anymore. Those who don't follow the Lord, that aren't righteous, that aren't blameless in the eyes of the Lord because they have faith and because they follow the Lord, right? They're going to be separated. And so there's going to be this separation where the righteous will inherit the land, whatever land that is and whatever land that looks like. And the wicked are going to wither. Those who don't follow the Lord are going to wither. That's what I'm seeing when I read this. I feel like that's what David is trying to tell us. I feel like this is what God has given David to tell us, that it is not necessarily literal, although they have won battles, right? The wicked has perished in a lot of ways, but some of the righteous have perished in these wars as well. All right. So, and then I just want to go down to verse 29 where it repeats it again. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever. So moving on to the law of God is in their heart. Their feet do not slip. And then I just want to go to verses 35 through 36. It says, I have seen a wicked and ruthless man flourishing like a luxuriant native tree. But he soon passed away and was no more. Though I looked for him, he could not be found. And then it says right before that, sorry, it said he will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are destroyed, you will see it. So there is going to be a time where the Lord is going to destroy the wicked. They're going to be flourishing, right? Like even here, they flourish, right? In some place, and we can see again. You can look around. We're not blind. We can look around and we can see. Like you go to how on earth, if God is righteous and just, how are the wicked flourishing? Well, He promises here that that is going to happen. We are going to see that they flourish. However, that's not going to last for eternity. And then finishing up with verse 39, the salvation or the saving of the righteous comes from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him. If we want that to be very literal on earth now, right? Because there were times where David was winning and the wicked was not winning. If we want that now, we must take refuge in the Lord. We have got to stop depending on ourselves. We have got to stop pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. We have got to be in prayer and just give everything over to the Lord. Submit to him, follow him, right? Follow his righteousness, follow his goodness, submit to him, ask him, right? Are you asking him to destroy the wicked? Or is that something maybe that you're fearful of asking because you're not necessarily sure who the wicked is? God is, by the way. God knows who it is. So I hope that helped a little bit if you were reading it. If not, I may have given you more questions. I'm not sure. But as always, I'd love to hear your opinion on that. All right, moving down, this is our last one today. This is Psalm 38. This is a petition. So again, we've had a few different things, right? A maskil, a mikdam, a prayer, a psalm, right? So we've had a few different things. This is a petition, which means it's a written request for the Lord. So he's actually requesting something from the Lord, but he wrote it down. So it's a written request. All right. So in verse 1, it says, Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. This is one of those ones that I actually had a question on, only because and David had a very, very full life and we didn't get all of his stories, but we don't actually hear a story about him being in any kind of pain or, excuse me, except at the end where he was really cold, right? And had to have somebody sleep with him. But that's really from being old. But other than that, we don't really see any of the things that he's talking about. So he starts discussing actual physical pain. My wounds fester and are loathsome because of my sinful folly. I am bowed down and brought very low. All day long I go about mourning. My back is filled with searing pain. There is no health in my body. I am feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart. Now, is he in, if it feels as if he's in literal pain. Now, some of these things could be dual meanings because he says, my wounds fester and are loathsome, but he says, because of my sinful folly. But then he's asking the Lord not to rebuke him in his anger. So there is some sin in there in him, and possibly it's coming out in a physical way, right? Like, so possibly the Lord is handling this in a very physical way for him. I don't even know what that beep was. So it was a neighbor's beep. Okay. So anyway, so I feel like there's something physical that is going on with him, but the physical is a manifestation of some of the sin that he has had, and so he's repenting of this. And then he says, all my longings lie open before you. So he's again not keeping anything secret. Verse 15, he says, Lord, I wait for you. You will answer, Lord my God, for I said, do not let them gloat or exalt themselves over me when my feet slip. So he's in this pain and he's suffering, and people can see it. And so he's asking the Lord to relieve him of this, so the people that don't love God won't be able to mock him and make fun of him, and in turn mock and make fun of God. Verse 17, from about to fall, my pain is ever with me. But here we go, 18, I confess my iniquity. I am troubled by my sin. So he's not doing what the wicked do, and he's just going, I don't even know what I did. What's wrong? Why are you mad at me? Right? So he recognizes that he has done something, and he's repenting of it. He's recognizing it, and he's repenting of it. And then he talks about other people being enemies. Finishing this up with verse 21 and 22, where it says, Lord, do not forsake me. Do not be far from me, my God. Come quickly to help me, my Lord and my Savior. So even knowing that his sin has possibly brought this on, he's asking the Lord for his help, and repenting and admitting his fault in this thing. And so again, he's always just putting the Lord first in the place. And even if the Lord has brought this on, he's still begging the Lord for his help to relieve him of it. Right? So the Lord has the power to do all these things. And it's in his goodness to do all of these things. That's ending for today. That's all we have. So I hope that those Psalms have been a blessing to you. If this recording has been a blessing to you, if it has helped you at all, I want you to like the page, hit the like button, share this channel with other people, and subscribe to the channel so it comes back to you every day. We will be reading every day. Tomorrow we are still in the book of Psalms. So I will see you then. And in the meantime, keep reading.